2017 was an American criminal and musician who led the Manson family, a cult based in California in the late 1960s. Some of the members committed a series of 9 murders at 4 locations in July and August 1969. In 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of 7 people, including the film actress Sharon Tate. The prosecution contended that while Manson never directly ordered the murders, his ideology constituted an overt act of conspiracy. Before the murders, Manson had spent more than half of his life in correctional institutions. While gathering his cult following, Manson was a singer-songwriter on the fringe of the Los Angeles music industry, chiefly through a chance association with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, who introduced Manson to record producer Terry Melcher. In 1968, the Beach Boys recorded Manson's song Cease to Exist, renamed Never Learn Not to Love, as a single B-side, but without a credit to Manson. Afterward, Manson attempted to secure a record through Melcher, but was unsuccessful. Let me just adjust one setting on here really quick. Okay, Manson would often talk about the Beatles, including their eponymous 1968 album. According to Los Angeles County District Attorney Vincent Buglioski, Manson felt guided by his interpretation of the Beatles' lyrics and adopted the term helter-skelter to describe an impending apocalyptic race war. During his trial, Bugliosi, this was Bugliosi, not Buglikowski, or whatever I said earlier, argued that Manson had intended to start a race war. Although Manson and others disputed this, contemporary interviews and trial witness testimony insisted that the Tate LaBianca murders were copycat crimes intended to exonerate Manson's friend Bobby Busolio. Manson himself denied having instructed anyone to murder anyone. I'll just pop another candy in my mouth. Or this original. Yeah. Manson's notoriety as an emblem of insanity, violence, and macabre influenced pop culture. Recordings of songs written and performed by Manson were released commercially, starting with Lie, the Love and Terror Cult, 1970. After his incarceration, some of his songs were covered by various artists. Although originally sentenced to death in 1971, his sentence was commuted to life with the possibility of parole after the California Supreme Court invalidated the state's death penalty statute in 1972. He served his life sentence at the California State Prison, Corcoran, and died at age 83 in late 2017. 1934 to 1967. Early life. Childhood. Manson was born on November 12, 1934, to 15-year-old Kathleen Manson, Bowler Cavender, Nee Maddox, 1919 to 1973, in the University of Cincinnati Academic Health Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was named Charles Mills Maddox, or maybe it's pronounced Charles Miles Maddox, I'm not sure. Manson's biological father appears to have been Colonel Walker Henderson Scott Sr. 1910 to 1954, of Catlettsburg, Kentucky, against whom Kathleen Maddox filed a paternity suit that resulted in an agreed judgment in 1937. Scott worked intermittently in local mills and had a local reputation as a con artist. He allowed Maddox to believe that he was an army colonel, although colonel, is that how you say it, colonel? I'm not sure. Colonel was merely his given name. When Maddox told Scott that she was pregnant, he told her he had been called away on army business. After several months, she realized he had no intention of returning. Manson may never have known his biological father. Excuse me, I'm going to drink out. In August 1934, before Manson's birth, Maddox married William Eugene Manson, 1909 to 1961, a laborer at a dry cleaning business. Maddox often went on drinking sprees with her brother Luther, leaving Charles with multiple babysitters. They divorced on April 30th, 1937. After William alleged gross neglect of duty by Maddox, Charles retained William's last name. Manson. On August 1st, 1939, Luther and Kathleen Maddox were arrested for assault and robbery. Kathleen and Luther were sentenced to 5 and 10 years of imprisonment, respectively. Manson was placed in the home of aunt and uncle McMitchin, West Virginia. His mother was paroled in 1942. Manson later characterized the first few weeks after she returned from prison as the happiest time in his life. Weeks after Maddox's release, Manson's family moved to Charleston, West Virginia, where Manson continually played truant truant, and his mother spent her evenings drinking. She was arrested for grand larceny, but not convicted. The family later moved to Indianapolis, where Maddox met an alcoholic with the last name Lewis through Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and married him in August 1943. First offenses. In an interview with Diane Sawyer, Manson said that when he was 9, he set his school on fire. Manson also got into trouble for truancy and petty theft. Although there was a lack of foster home placements in 1947, at the age of 13, Manson was placed in the Guild School for Boys in Derry, Indiana, a school for male delinquents run by Catholic priests. Guild was a strict school where punishment for even the smallest infraction included beatings with either a wooden paddle or leather strap. Manson ran away from Guild and slept in the woods, under bridges, and wherever else he could find shelter. Excuse me, I'm gonna pop another candy in. Manson fled home to his mother and spent Christmas 1947 in Michigan at his aunt and uncle's house. His mother returned him to Gibbald. 10 months later, he ran away to Indianapolis. In 1948, in Indianapolis, Manson committed his first known crime by robbing a grocery store. At first, the robbery was simply to find something to eat. However, Manson found a cigar box containing just over $100, and he took the money. He used the money to rent a room on Indianapolis's Skid Row and to buy food. For a time, Manson had a job delivering messages for Western Union in an attempt to live a life free of crime. However, he quickly began to supplement his wages through petty theft. He was eventually caught, and in 1949, a sympathetic judge sent him to Boys Town, a juvenile facility in Omaha, Nebraska. After 4 days at Boys Town, he and fellow student Blackie Nielsen obtained a gun and stole a car. They used it to commit 2 armed robberies on their way to the home of Nielsen's uncle in Peoria, Illinois. Peoria, Illinois. Okay, Nielsen's uncle was a professional thief. And when the boys arrived, he allegedly took them on as apprentices. Manson was arrested 2 weeks later during a nighttime raid on a Peoria store. In the investigation that followed, he was linked to his 2 earlier armed robberies. He was sent to the Indiana Boys School, a strict reform school. At the school, other students allegedly raped Manson with the encouragement of a staff member, and he was repeatedly beaten beaten. He ran away from the school 18 times. While at the school, Manson developed a self-defense technique he would later call the insane game. When he was physically unable to defend himself, he would screech, grimace, and wave his arms to convince the aggressors that he was insane. After a number of failed attempts, he escaped with other boys in February 1951. The three escapes were robbing filling stations while attempting to drive to California in stolen cars when they were arrested in Utah. For the federal crime of driving a stolen car across state lines, Manson was sent to Washington, D.C.'s National Training School for Boys. On arrival, he was given aptitude tests, which determined that he was illiterate, but had an above-average IQ of 109. His caseworker deemed him aggressively antisocial. First imprisonment. On a psychiatrist's recommendation, Manson was transferred in October 1951 to a Natural Bridge Honor Camp, a minimum security institution. His aunt visited him and told administrators she would let him stay at her house and would help him find work. Manson had a parole hearing scheduled for February 1952. However, in January, he was caught raping a boy at knife point. Manson was transferred to the Federal Reformatory in Petersburg, Virginia. He then committed a further 8 serious disciplinary offenses, 3 involving homosexual acts. He was then moved to a maximum security reformatory at Chillicothe, Ohio, where he was expected to remain until his release on his 21st birthday in November 1955. Good behavior led to an early release in May 1954 to live with his aunt and uncle in McMechen. In January 1955, Manson married a hospital waitress named Rosalie Jean Willis. Around October, about 3 months after he and his pregnant wife arrived in Los Angeles in a car he had stolen in Ohio, Manson was again charged with the federal crime for taking the vehicle across state lines. After a psychiatric evaluation, he was given 5 years probation. Manson failed to appear at Los Angeles hearing on an identical charge filed in Florida, resulted in his March 1956 arrest in Indianapolis. His probation was revoked and he was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment at Terminal Island in Los Angeles. While Manson was in prison, Rosalie gave birth to their son, Charles Manson Jr., during his first year at Terminal Island. Manson received visits from Rosalie and his mother, who were now living together in Los Angeles. In March 1957, when the visits from his wife ceased, his mother informed him Rosalie was living with another man. Less than 2 weeks before a scheduled parole hearing, Manson tried to escape by stealing a car. He was given 5 years probation, and his parole was denied. Second imprisonment. Manson received 5 years parole in September 1958, the same year in which Rosalie received a decree of divorce. By November, he was pimping a 16-year-old girl and receiving additional support from a girl with wealthy parents. In September 1959, he pleaded guilty to a charge of attempting to cash a forged U.S. Treasury check, which he claimed to have stolen from a mailbox. The latter charge was later dropped. He received a 10-year suspended sentence and probation after a young woman named Leona, who had an arrest record for prostitution, made a tearful plea before the court that she and Manson were deeply in love and would marry if Charlie were freed. Before the year's end, the woman did marry Manson, possibly so she would not be required to testify against him. Excuse me, I'm gonna pop another candy into my mouth. How do you open these things? Having some trouble here. Okay, got it. Manson took Leona and another woman to New Mexico for purposes of prostitution, resulting in him being held and questioned for violating the Mann Act. Though he was released, Manson correctly suspected that the investigation had not ended. When he disappeared in violation of his probation, a bench warrant was issued. An indictment for violation of the Mann Act followed in April 1960. Following the arrest of one of the women for prostitution with another, Manson was arrested in June in Laredo, Texas, and was returned to Los Angeles for violating his probation on the check cashing charge. He was ordered to serve his 10-year sentence. Manson spent a year trying unsuccessfully to appeal the revocation of his probation. In July 1961, he was transferred from the Los Angeles County Jail to the United States Penitentiary at McNeil Island, Washington. There he took guitar lessons from Parker Carbis, gang leader Alvin Creepy Carbis, and obtained from another inmate a contact name of someone at Universal Studios in Hollywood, Phil Kaufman. Among his fellow prisoners during this time was Danny Trejo, I'm not sure, who participated in several hypnosis sessions. According to Jeff Quinn's 2013 biography of Manson, his mother moved to Washington State to be closer to him during his McNeil Island incarceration, working nearby as a waitress. Although the Mann Act charge had been dropped, the attempt to cash the Treasury treasury check was still a federal offense. Manson's September 1961 annual review noted he had a tremendous drive to call attention to himself. An observation echoed in September 1964. In 1963, Leona was granted a divorce. During the process, she alleged that she and Manson had a son, Charles Luther. According to a popular urban legend, Manson auditioned unsuccessfully for the Monkees in late 1965. This is refuted by the fact that Manson was still incarcerated at McNeil Island at that time. In June 1966, Manson was sent for the second time to Terminal Island in preparation for early release. By the time of his release day on March 21st, 1967, he had spent more than half of his 32 years in prisons and other institutions. This was mainly because he had broken federal laws. Federal sentences were and remained much more severe than state sentences for many of the same offenses. Telling the authorities that prison had become his home, he requested permission to stay. 1968, San Francisco and cult formation. Parolee and patient. Less than a month after his 1967 release from prison, Manson moved to Berkeley from Los Angeles, which could have been a probation violation. Instead, after calling the San Francisco probation office upon his arrival, he was transferred to the supervision of criminology doctoral researcher and federal probation officer Roger Smith. Until the spring of 1968, Smith worked at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, HAFMC, which Manson and his family frequented throughout their stay in the Haight. Roger Smith, as well as the HAFMC's founder, David E. Smith, received funding from the National Institutes of Health and reportedly the CIA to study the effects of drugs like LSD and methamphetamine on the counterculture movement in the Haight-Ashbury. The patients at the clinic became subjects of their research, including Manson and his expanding group of mostly female followers who came to see Roger Smith regularly. Manson received permission from Roger Smith to move from Berkeley to the Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco. He first took LSD and would use it frequently during his time there. David Smith, who had studied the effects of LSD and amphetamines in rodents, wrote that the change in Manson's personality during this time was the most abrupt Roger Smith had observed in his entire professional career. Manson also read the book A Stranger in Strange Land, a science fiction novel by Robert A. Heinlein. Inspired by the burgeoning free love philosophy in Haight-Ashbury during the Summer of Love, Manson began preaching his own philosophy based on a mixture of Stranger in a Strange Land, the Bible, Scientology, David Carnegie, and the Beatles, which quickly earned him a following. Cult formation. This might be some good stuff here. I'm just gonna pop in a second candy though. Just give me a sec. Cult formation. Manson had already gained his first follower at the UC Berkeley campus. Librarian Mary Brunner, excuse me for the throat clearing by the way. He talked her into letting him sleep at her house for a few nights. An arrangement that quickly became permanent. He then met Lynette Squeaky from a runaway teen and convinced her to live with him and Brunner. Manson soon began to attract large crowds of listeners and some dedicated followers. He targeted individuals for manipulation who were emotionally insecure and social outcasts. In his book Love Needs Care about his time at the HAFMC, David Smith claims that Manson attempted to reprogram their minds to submit totally to his will through the use of LSD and unconventional sexual practices that would turn his followers into empty vessels that would accept anything he poured. Manson family member Paul Watkins testified that Manson would encourage group LSD trips and take lower doses himself to keep his wits about him. Watkins said that Charlie's trip was to program us all to submit. By the end of his stay in the Height in April 1968, Manson had attracted 20 or so followers, all under the supervision of his parole officer Roger Smith and many of the staff at the HAFMC. The core members of Manson's following included Charles Tex Watson, a musician and former actor, Bobby Busolio, a former musician and pornographic actor, Brunner, Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten. Further arrests. Supervised by his parole officer Roger Smith, Manson grew his family through drug use and prostitution. Without interference from the authorities, Manson was arrested on July 31st, 1967 for attempting to prevent the arrest of one of his followers, Ruth Ann Morehouse. Instead of being sent back to prison, the charge was reduced to a misdemeanor, and Manson was given 3 additional years of probation. He avoided prosecution again in July 1968 when he and the family were arrested while moving from San Francisco to Los Angeles with the permission of Roger Smith when his bus crashed into a ditch where Manson and members of his family, including Brunner and Manson's newborn baby, were sleeping naked by police. After he was arrested again and released only a few days later, this time on a drug charge. Doomsday beliefs. The Manson family developed into a doomsday cult. When Manson became fixated on the idea of an imminent apocalyptic race war between America's black population and the larger white population, a white supremacist, Manson told some of the Manson family that black people in America would rise up and kill all the white people except for Manson and his family, but that they were not intelligent enough to survive on their own. They would need a white man to lead them, and so they would serve Manson as their master. According to Vincent Bugliosi, in 1968, Manson adopted the term helter-skelter, taken from a song on the Beatles' recently released album, White Album, to refer to this upcoming war. 1969 to 1971, murders and trial. Murders. In early August 1969, some Manson family members committed murders in Los Angeles. The Manson family gained national notoriety after the murder of actress Sharon Tate and four others in her home on August 8th and 9th, 1969. And Leno and Rosemary LaBianca the next day. Tex Watson and three other members of the family committed the Tate LaBianca murders, allegedly under Manson's instructions. While it was later accepted at trial that Manson never expressly ordered the murders, his behavior was deemed to warrant a conviction of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Evidence pointed to Manson's obsession with inciting a race war